I feel like could care less about the money is Joe Rogan. How important is he to the UFC, to the rise of the UFC? And what, in general, do you love about Joe?
It's a fact. He doesn't.
Look at Lex already smiling. Lex already coming in his pants talking about Rogan.
UFC, to the rise of the UFC. And what, in general, do you love about Joe?
Look at that face. That's a man that fucking loves Rogan probably more than his own father. What do you love about Joe? What do you love about Joe? What do you love about Joe? You little thin lips. What do you love about Joe? My name is Lex Friedman. What do you love about Joe? Joe is my best friend. I play song for just friend.
In the desert, I met a man with an eagle perching on his hand. And he asked me, son, what can I do for you? Definitely the stupidest. Father, I said, I'm looking for the meaning I should be living for. He put a finger to my lips, said, shh, let the old man speak. They call me Brian Callahan. In this cruel world, there is a man you should listen to as you journey on through life. His name is Joe Rogan. Joe Rogan, shoulders for days and a really wide back. Joe Rogan, barrel of snakes for a back. Then he mounted his horse and he looked to the sky and he rode to the sunset with a tear in his eye. And the legend goes, the old man rides on, singing the words to this terrible song. Joe Rogan, shoulders for days and a really wide back. I already regret this. Joe Rogan, a barrel of snakes for a bag.
You fucked up. You should have never done that song. It was terrible, man.
Fuck off. Fuck off. Fuck off. Let's continue.
It's a fact. He doesn't care about money. And he did the first 13 shows for free for us.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? That was at a time when we were hurting. And he's like, wait a minute. You want me to do the commentary? You're saying that I get to sit in the best seat in the house and watch these fights for free?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm in.
Yeah.
So, and then obviously when we turned things around, we made it up to Joe. But Joe is one of the things that I loved early on about. So I'll tell you the story. So we buy the UFC. Mm-hmm. They're based in New York. We're moving the corporate offices to Vegas. So I have to fly out to New York, go into the offices and start going through everything and figuring out what needs to come back to Vegas and what we can just throw away. So they literally had a VHS machine and a TV, and there were a million tapes in this place, man. So I didn't know what tapes were these definitely we have to keep or these we don't need. So I had to sit there and go through every single tape. And I popped in a tape and there was an interview on the Ivory Keenan Wayans show, right? The oldest Wayans brother. And he had a talk show at the time. And he had Joe Rogan, the guy from Fear Factor, on the show.
Yeah.
And he was promoting Fear Factor, but all he would talk about was UFC. And
yeah, that's Joe.
He was talking about how people think that these guys in the martial arts movies are tough and can do it. And he was talking about what UFC fighters would do to these martial arts guys if they ever got their hands on them. And I was like, this is exactly what I need. A guy who isn't afraid to speak his mind and knows the sport inside and out, but more importantly, is super passionate about it and love it.
You know what? This probably explains a lot. This probably explains the reason why Joe is so quiet when it comes to UFC fighter pay, because it's something that's always bugged me and annoyed me about Joe Rogan, because he's very noble and very stand up when it comes to comedians getting paid, right? He always speaks very openly about how much he hates stealing. Obviously the Carlos Mencia thing, you know how he fucking hates comedians when they steal. And he's also very vocal about comedians getting paid, a good salary or a good fee for what they do. So much so that other comedians say that he sometimes, or he does as a rule, he overpays comedians at his comedy store, the Comedy Mothership. People say this, right? That his comedy club, the Comedy Mothership, they overpay comedians. It's a fucking amazing fucking salary, amazing fee what they get paid. It's fucking crazy. Da, 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 da. So clearly Rogan is very noble, very fair in that regard. But for some reason, Rogan always turns a blind eye or refuses to comment when it comes to the fight, when it comes to fighter pay in the UFC. And fighter pay in the UFC is abhorrent. It's absolutely disgusting what they do to them, right? Because the majority of fighters in the UFC don't even earn a salary enough for them just to do fighting professionally. Some fighters, you see them come on fight cards and say, yeah, I was overdrawn. I still owe my trainer certain bits of money. I was down to my last $100. It's a literal crime for you to be a signed fighter on the UFC roster and for you not to be able to make a base salary of what, like $30,000, $40,000, $50,000 a year. It's fucking insane. If anything, the UFC make it harder for the fighters to make a lot of money because they put the onus on the fighters to accept more pay. No, they put the onus on the fighters to have more fights to get more money. So if you fight more often, that's when you get paid more often. But obviously if you fight more often, there's more chance of you losing. And if you lose more often, there's more chance of you getting cut. So it's a fucking it's a dumb way to kind of do things. But obviously it alleviates, or it kind of takes away the pressure for the UFC having to pay people fairly, and then they get to keep all the money and line their pockets. For instance, Dana White probably bets more on the one hand of cards than he pays some fighters per year. Dana White probably loses more money in a weekend than some whole fight cards make in a whole fucking, than the whole fight card people make on there. So it's quite disgusting how shitty they get paid. And the thing that really annoys about Rogan is that if there was a comedy club that treated comedians the same way Dana treats fighters, Rogan will be talking about it from the rooftops. He would not have it. He'd be standing up for him. He'd be talking about it really vocally. But the fact that he works for the UFC and he's best friends with Dana White, he sort of like looks the other way when it comes to fighter pay. I remember when Luke Thomas was on the Joe Rogan Experience and tried to talk about it, Rogan was literally acting as if like he'd never heard of it being an issue. Like he'd never heard of it being a problem where fighters were struggling for money. It's like Rogan has interviewed fighters sometime in the octagon, and they've been begging Dana for like a sponsorship, or they'll get on a mic and start begging for a prime endorsement. He knows how desperate these fighters are, or they'll start begging and saying to Dana, hey Dana, that should be a fight bonus, knockouts bonus. He see how desperate the fighters are and he says nothing. That's the thing that kind of, I'm not gonna lie, slightly disgusts me about Rogan. How he will turn a blind eye based on his fans, based on his, who he's friends with and everything. So he loves to act like he can say whatever he wants and he's not afraid to say certain things. But, when it's his friends, he would definitely not say anything and definitely turn a blind eye and pretend it didn't happen. But I think the paid thing with the UFC fighters is super sad. Especially considering they put their bodies, they put their health, they put their fucking future on the line to fight, and some of them legitimately can't make $30,000 a year without having to take 6 fights in a year. It's fucking diabolical, to be honest. But this definitely explains why Rogan is so loyal to the UFC, because he's been with them from the day dot, and he's like a fan. But I think his refusal to speak up for the fighters is disgusting, even though someone would say it's not on Rogan to speak for the fighters, because if the fighters can't unionize, if the fighters can't organize themselves to get fucking, better money and shit, then obviously it's on them. And obviously the recent court case is a good example of like some UFC fighters are just refuse to sort of like unionize and get together because they don't want to come against the UFC. And I know how Dana White is so vindictive, so petty, that if you do come against him and you put your name down in that lawsuit, you could effectively be, putting your future in jeopardy. So I understand why the fighters are a little bit apprehensive about it, but I think it does take a big figure, somebody powerful in the media, to say something, and Rogan could say something, but he doesn't. So it's a real piss take, but this probably explains why Rogan doesn't say anything, because his ties with UFC are deep.
Loves it. So when you see Joe Rogan on camera, and I was talking about the paid talking heads that they had in HBO boxing that were terrible, Joe Rogan does not come off as a paid talking head. He comes off as
what?
the guy who loves this. And so early on, no media would cover us. So I had to buy my way onto radio. So we do these radio tours, right? And they would drop us in. You'd have to get up at 3:30 in the morning in Vegas on the West Coast. And because there at 6:30 in the morning in New York and Boston and Florida and all these other places. So they drop you into these markets to do radio, right? And the fighters were horrible at it. Fighters getting up at 3:30 in the morning, especially leading up to a fight, never good.
Yeah.
They sound like they're tired. They act like they're tired. And they definitely act like they don't want to be on there. And it's bad radio. What you can't have is bad radio. So the only two people that could pull off these radio tours were me and Joe Rogan. So me and Joe Rogan would alternate doing these radio tours all over the country.
Just talking about fighting, talking about what this whole thing is, like 100%. Getting people excited.
Two guys that are really into it and passionate about it and love.
But to be fair though, I know his silence is obviously compliance and shit. But to be fair, he did do a lot for the sport of UFC. Like, I don't think I would have ever discovered the UFC before because I listened to Rogan, then I discovered the UFC. And I discovered jiu-jitsu for the UFC, through Rogan as well. So I think Rogan's done a lot for combat sports, jiu-jitsu, Muay Thai, UFC. He done a lot. He probably introduced a lot of people like myself to that version of martial arts or combat sports, because I don't think without his involvement, I would have ever really taken a liking to it at the time that I did. I appreciate it more because of how we spoke about it in depth, having fighters on, having coaches on and shit. That was really kind of informative in my kind of experience
of it. And it's one of the things about Rogan too. When early on, nobody understood the ground game. Joe Rogan would walk you through what was happening literally before it would happen. He would tell you the setup, what was going to come next, and everything, and just absolutely articulate it perfectly, brilliantly, and people at home started to understand. And the
only thing I'll say about his commentary now, I feel like Rogan's commentary hasn't really evolved with the sport. I feel like he sounds very, I won't say ill-informed, but he gets a lot of things wrong. He sometimes call fights are over, and they're not over clearly. He has a very skewed perspective on who's winning or who isn't. Like, sometimes you watch fight cards, like, hold on, what is Rogan talking about? Clearly the person that is winning is the one that you're seeing with your own eyes. Sorry, which is why sometimes now I've come to the point where I've stopped listening to the commentary when I watch UFC cards. I'm not sure about you guys, but unless I'm doing a stream or something, I'll watch it on mute. Legit, I'll watch like the main, I don't know, I don't really bother now because the commentary is always skewed. And sometimes you notice if you watch it on mute and then you check what the people are saying, in between rounds, you're like, fuck, they're completely watching this a completely different way than I am. And I think a lot of it maybe has to do with maybe if you're in the octagon, or sorry, maybe if you're in the arena, it's a bit different. But I feel like Rogan's commentary hasn't really kept up with the times, unfortunately so. But hey, what do I know?
Impact that Joe Rogan has had and continues to have on this sport is immeasurable. He's the biggest podcaster in the world. And he is on the UFC pay-per-views, 14 times a year. And he's always talking about the sport. It's immeasurable what this guy has done for this.
That's a good point, though. That is a really good point. He's a great ambassador for the UFC because he always speaks about the UFC, even when he's not at the UFC. Like, he doesn't treat UFC as a job. He treats it like an amazing hobby that he gets paid for. So he speaks about it glowingly all the time, basically all year round, without it always being on air. Do you know what I mean? So that does a lot for the UFC as well in terms of keeping its name around and shit. That's sort of stuff you can't buy. There's not a contract you could ever put forward to somebody that would ever make them want to talk about you, all day long. The fact that he does it is like is a good endorsement for them, and obviously proof that he loves the sport and doesn't really care about the job too much.
This company and the sport.
Yeah, still to this day. Like, I'll have dinner with him offline. He'll just talk fighting.
Yeah,
he just loves it.
I'll have dinner with him offline. Fucking hell, bro. How gay can you get? I mean, like date night with fucking Joe Rogan. You and him sitting across, the table, candlelit table with the fucking steaks and potatoes, right? Talking about fucking intermittent fasting and shit. Fuck off, you fucking dork.
It's true.
Loves every aspect of it.
Yeah. Joe Rogan is one of those guys. I saw that early on.
How else are you meant to have dinner with somebody, basically? Or when I have dinner with him offline. How else are you meant to have dinner with somebody? You meant to have dinner online or something? The offline deal, just to add, like, yeah, me and him hang out in private offline. It's like when rapper girlfriends mention their boyfriend, a rapper, but they always mention him by their first name. Oh, Jeffrey. Oh, like Terrence, Jordan. It's like, fuck off, we get it. We get this guy comes inside of you. We understand, but let's relax with the calling him by his first name. Joseph, Joe, or whatever his middle name is, Frederick. Fuck off.
On when Why would you go after the Fear Factor guy?
Yeah.
You know, to be such a key component to not only the company, but to the sport. I saw it in the fucking interview on Ivory Keenan Wayans.
I value loyalty a lot. And I remember there was a moment
I value loyalty.
not too long ago, maybe a year ago, when I was sitting with Joe and he had a phone call with you. Joe was getting canceled for something. And they didn't want him commentating the fights. And you on the phone offered your resignation over this.
Wow. And we didn't know about that, did we? That's pretty, to be honest, that's pretty badass. I'm not going to lie. That's something that you have to give Dana credit for. He does kind of run the UFC like it's his own company, annoyingly. He does treat the fighters like shit. He does antagonize, bully, humiliate, and just too combative. And the way he treats the media is a bit disgusting. But the one thing he does do is that he rides hard for his people. Like, if he likes a fighter, he's going to ride hard for them. Somebody that works professionally with him, he's going to work hard. Like, he does like stand up for his shit. He does stand on his shit. So the fact that he offered his recognition, the fact that he offered his resignation and they didn't accept it and kept Joe on board says a lot about how powerful he is. And obviously, to me, I thought once, this is one of my things, I've always said that I think the UFC will go another level once Dana White is out of the UFC. But I don't really think the issues with fighter pay stop at Dana White. I think the fighter pay thing is a UFC company thing overall. Because if they can get away with paying fighters 12 on 12, why would they change that tactic when they get rid of Dana? It doesn't make any sense. If they can get away with, like, again, this is the thing, the UFC have a monopoly. There's no real fair competition at the moment. There's no real competition that comes close to even touching the UFC. PFL, Bellator, doesn't fucking matter. So the UFC is the main league, the main organization around. So all the best fighters want to fight in the UFC, even though they don't pay well, because I think of the exposure, the quality of fights, the entertainment value, where you get to fight, the fan base is fucking incredible. So they're all willing to sacrifice shit money to fight in the best organization. But if the best organization has the best talent and they pay like shit, why would they then change it just because Dana White's gone? I think it's a company philosophy. It's a company strategy. Be like, you know what? We're not paying these guys a good salary. We don't give a fuck. Go suck on it. I think that's what they're basically doing. I don't think they're going to change anytime soon, unfortunately.
I got teary-eyed over that. That's such a...
Did he say he got teary-eyed over that? He said he nearly cried. No, Lex, you didn't say that. No, Lex, did he say he nearly cried? Hold on.
A phone call with you. Joe's getting canceled for something. And they didn't want him commentating the fights. And you on the phone offered your resignation over this. I got teary-eyed over that.
Gay. I got look at his face. I got teary-eyed over that. Little thin-lipped weirdo, bro. There's not another man in the world I would ever simp for like this. I swear to God. There's not another man in the world I'd ever simp for like this. I swear to fucking God. Even if they're fucking famous. It's fucking disgusting. The guy doesn't even probably simp over his own dad like this. And his dad fucking brought him into the world via his fucking nutsacks. He doesn't even simp over his own dad like this. But he's another man like, I got teary-eyed over the fact that you nearly would resign because Rogan was getting cancelled. Fuck off. Dork.
That's such a... You're a good man, you know?
Thank you.
That was powerful.
Can I suck your dick? You're a really good man. Can I suck your dick? Dana, can you show me your uncut, very pale, very girthy penis? And could you shove it into my mouth? My really small mouth? My really small mouth, my really small lips. Could you shove it inside of my mouth, Dana? And I could... Maybe I can dip your dick into some AG1. Maybe I can dip your dick into some AG1 because, you know, Huberman, he fucks a lot of girls, and if I dip your dick into AG1 and I suck it, maybe if I suck it and it's Huberman's AG1, maybe I can get some girls. maybe I can lose maybe I can lose my virginity for you. Please help me, Dana, 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 Dana. I want to suck your dick, Dana.
Anybody who is with me, has been with me, knows. When you're with me, you're with me. It's a two-way street.
See, that's why I don't like Dana, because you run a business. You're not meant to have like, you don't have to have people that you're with and not with. No, you run a business. Do what's right for the business. It's not about you. And again, his ego is too big. He wants to be the main character of everything, but fuck that. When you're with me, you're with me. When you're not, you're not. That's why, again, actually a good point to make. That's why the Brendan thing's hilarious. Brendan honestly thought he could suck Dana off and start making all these dumb compliments or these trying to get back in his good books. It's like, no, you're never gonna get back in his good books. You try to end his marriage, try to end his marriage, talking about Eskimo brother thing. Like, Dana and Brendan are never gonna be cool. The fact that Joe Rogan couldn't broker peace between Dana and Brendan shows that there's deep hatred, especially on Dana's side for Brendan. The fact that Rogan couldn't broker a peace is proof they're never going to be friends. And then for some reason, Brendan thought he could do the whole let me suck him off thing and he's going to be my friend. No, he doesn't care. The guy is a vindictive, petty, very, egotistical guy. Obviously a great businessman, don't get me wrong. But Dana is he still fucking hates Ariel Helwani, bro. Ariel Helwani still can't go to fucking UFC fight events. If Ariel walks into a UFC arena and Dana hears about it, he'll definitely get him escorted out. Ariel Helwani, just a journalist, a media figure, who maybe broke some news he wasn't meant to break or whatever it is. He hasn't done nothing that bad really to Dana. And Dana still hates him from this day. The fact that Brendan thought he could get back into his good books is hilarious.
It's not a one-way street. I'm not one of these guys that is going to roll over and it's like going through COVID. I wasn't laying any of these people. Some of these people have been with me for 20 years. We're gonna lay them off. This motherfucker will burn.
Yeah.
Before I would do that to my people. It's just never.
To be fair, that was a good thing he did, though. I'm not gonna lie, that was a good thing. The fact that he didn't lay off anybody during COVID when everyone else was getting fired showed that the UFC was on point. Even though they put in a lot of fights, during time as well, was quite good. I think that was still quite good as well. Kept the fighters busy too. But yeah, that was a pretty decent thing that he did. I'm not gonna lie, because a lot of companies did lay off a ton of people, and a lot of them have kind of not hired them back again because they realized that most of them were just hiring for the sake of investments and shit in it to look good on the stock market. But in terms of actual, operating as a business and operating at the highest level, you don't really need that many people to do anything really. And I think obviously Elon Musk was the proof of that, because I think the Elon thing as well, people overlook of how important that was to the global fucking workspace. I think when Elon fired all those people at Twitter and then kind of I think it was 70 or 80% of the workforce, he got rid of them, and Twitter still didn't die or didn't crumble. Any people were like, hold on, you don't need that many people to do anything, do you really? And I think that's what started the trend of everyone firing everybody and closing down that satellite offices and shit. But credit to the UFC for keeping everybody on board.
None of that type of stuff is ever going to happen while I'm here. I can't say what's going to happen when I leave, but when I'm here, the people who are with me and have been with me, they know exactly what's up.
That's fair enough. Big up Dana White. Again, I would love Joe Rogan to be a little bit more vocal when it comes to the fighter pay stuff. I think it's super shit that he doesn't say nothing, because I think if it happened in the comedy world, he would have a lot to say. And the fact that he doesn't say anything, to me, is kind of annoying, but I get it. I fucking get it.